We're honored to have you. Thank you
Okay,
so much for opening with a prayer the way that you did. Thank you.
okay.
Hi.
This is in the present, what happened a couple of years ago, where I saw something very beautiful and very powerful, and something I'll never forget. So I work in a clinic for pregnant moms, and our community, young moms, 75, I think, or 90% of them come to that clinic. And this one day, uh, a non-native mom came in there. She brought her little boy along with her, and he just starts kind of playing and looking around. And then a native girl comes in. She brings a little boy. She sits down, and then the little guys start eyeing each other up. Pretty soon, they're playing with one another, and they were enjoying themselves. Then I just looked at them and I thought, like, how beautiful is this? Those children are just being children. They are being themselves. And in this world, the only time you're going to see truth is in children. After childhood, we change. So then the native mom got done up, and she starts leaving, calls her little boy, and they start walking towards the door. Before that little native boy uh, walked out the door, he turned around and he waves at the non-Indian boy, and the non-Indian boy just waves back. And I was happy to see that. And at the same time, I was sad because I knew one of those kids was going to begin feeling inferior. He was going to feel and experience racism. And the non native, through no fault of his own, that little boy will adopt a belief system that white people are superior. You know, we talk about intergenerational issues on our side and how trauma is um, passed on. And my grandmother told me long time ago, like I said, I'm 75 now. I was maybe in my 30s or something like that. And she said, just get it, granddaughter. She said it in Cree. Nsito ta. Understand this, that white people, they raise each other with certain attitudes, certain beliefs. Those things become values. So today's children, like those little ones, don't even know that they're going to be adapting systems, belief systems. And I was sad. I was I was sad. But it was good to see, because you see the potential and the possibility in their behavior. And that's what carried me too, you know. So these are things, gifts that you bring to your clients. And more and more these past few years, I really realized that we need those non-native champions to teach their cultures about attitudes that don't serve the world.
Mhm.
It's kind of like us before I realized what colonization was. before I realized and I understood what internalized oppression meant, they too, the Canadians, they don't know the history. So they need to go back in time too. So I encourage all you listeners to go back and read and study for your own personal growth. When I was going to school, I went back late to school. I think I was 47 and I had to take USEP, they call it. That's the university transfer stuff. I had to upgrade it. So I did that. And then I went into psychology. I majored in psychology in my BA, and I did the core work in my master's for that too. And I chose psychology because my grandmother told me that the mind, the brain, is the greatest gift the Creator gave to humanity. And each of all the nations on this planet were given a set of directions of how to live in this world. For Christians, they got the Bible. For us, we too were given our cultural teachings to follow. Although, as you know, it is challenging because the younger generations are, their next step is to learn their culture. They will be okay if if they learn their culture. But going back to all you beautiful people that are mentoring Indigenous youth, go back and study. Go back and study the Indian Act, for example, and all the legislations that were developed and implemented to acculturate the North American Indian people. And once you get that, you will change. It will just happen. And then you take a bigger step towards your mentoring journey. Now, uh, Tanya, did you want me to talk about that reconciliation?
That would be fantastic to talk about this week and what it means to our people and how the national holiday coincides with Orange Shirt Day, Muriel.
That's on the 30th, eh?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I went to a workshop in they call it Blue Quills University, and they gave me a T-shirt like that for reconciliation. Um, okay, the truth and reconciliation was a very, very important first step for our people to begin to address their own wounds from residential school. I did, to be truthful, I didn't read it I didn't read the 75, like the big book. I didn't read it yet, but I went through the calls and I attended one. They had several reconciliation events in all those years, and also the missing and murdered also came into play. So it really helped that the commission was developed and directed to explore the residential schools and their impacts that shows itself in the life of every lost young person. Elders, I think, kept it more like a big secret. They didn't talk about what happened to them in those boarding schools. Some even said that they didn't mind the residential school, that they got 3 square meals a day and they had a bed. And in my mind, I'm thinking, MAGA, but they were stealing your culture while you were there. They were stealing your culture at the time so that your grandchildren will never speak their language and they won't like who they are. And it is so crazy at how successful it got to brainwashing. Now, I cried lots in my time of healing. In 1992, they were having conferences in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And my nation, the 4 nations in Maswacis, sent a large delegation. I think that conference was 3 days. So we all start going into different sessions. And I went into this one session. It was like a theater. And there was no seat open. So I had to stand by the wall and I noticed all these Kleenexes all over. And I thought, how come they put those there? And here the session was about the residential school and what happened in that residential school. I just hung my head and cried. I saw they did a good job. The person who staged the play is passed away now. His name was Daryl Wildcat. And I'll just tell you a little story about Daryl. I'm sure it's okay. I worked in different departments, mostly as a department head when I was working after I got my degree. And Daryl was sick and he couldn't really get a job because he'd have his on days, off days. He was having cancer. So this one day, we got pretty close. And he didn't talk much Cree, so I was teaching him. So this one day, I thought, I'm gonna ask Daryl a question. So I went and got my cigarette. And I asked Daryl, you've been in a hospital, in and out of hospital for the past few years. And I'm sure you learned some lessons. I want you to share one with me, I told him. So he took the cigarette and then he starts telling me, he said, I've had some close ones, meaning he almost died a few times. He said, then in one of those times, he said, there is really a tunnel. He said, I went through this tunnel and just a little dot way, way far, I saw this dot. As I was getting closer, it got bigger and lighter. When I got close, I seen men and they were drumming. They were singing and drumming. And one of them was my dad. And he just shook his head no. He said, next thing I was back on the hospital bed. He said, that's what I'm sharing with you. And so then he was not that cultured, eh? And he says, no, Muriel, what do I do with this cigarette? I said, Daryl, just go put it by a tree. Ask that tree for a blessing. Ask Mother Earth, ask Creator. And he said, okay, I will. But so this is our story. This is where we come from. And it was Daryl who was putting up that a workshop that afternoon. And I saw just how the priests would just grab kids by the hair, hit them with their fists, and sexually abuse the children, the boys and the girls, and how they starved them and how they scared them. And then they got to a different, like part two or something like that. And then they started showing the impacts of that residential school. Moms were neglecting their children. Nobody spoke Cree. There was no sweat lodge. And men were beating up their women. And I just started crying. And then they started, the third part showed a little bit about people asking, what happened to me there? Why did that happen? And so they left us with a little bit of hope. And when I didn't want those lights to come on because I was really crying. And now I knew why those Kleenexes were all over the place. They put the lights on and everyone was crying. There was about 2,500 women in that place. Everybody was crying. But yet, I was happy because we began to learn what happened to us. I never knew that children's brains were altered. I didn't know that. And then I also learned that we can begin to restructure, relearn our beliefs. There is so much power in the culture. And I began to learn that also. I started sun dancing when I was in my late 20s, and I sun danced for a long, long time. And during that time, also, I experienced trauma, and my husband didn't go for healing. I did it, and I had to leave. But in many ways, I didn't leave soon enough, because now I can't hear. I didn't leave because I didn't believe in myself, that I could survive, that I could grow. I didn't believe in those things. Even the power of my culture and the language, I didn't know that they were, what do you call it, protective factors, you know, until I started using them, and I started to help elders. And one of the ways I found out that I didn't have a belief in the power of my culture was, when we go to school, we write papers, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And all I remember was, I got to pass this course. So I just said what everybody else was saying, at the time, about colonization, about the treaties, about everything else. And I would get a good mark. But this one night, about 2 o'clock in the morning, I was on my computer writing this paper, and I thought, wait a minute, let me see if I got this relationship that I'm talking about here. So I thought, now how can I know that? So I started thinking about my children, and just love came into my heart. And I think, like, in my bones, all over. And then I turned that off, and I thought, Mother Earth, I thought about Mother Earth, and nothing came. And I sat there and I bawled my head off. And that's when I began to kind of know that what I believed in when I was a child was changed in that schoolhouse. When I was a child, it was like a very good time. It seemed like I just naturally belonged to the earth, and the earth was mine. And all of its beautiful creations, every year in the fall time, many Indian people go on moose hunts. Right now is that time. They're out there right now. When I was there, now they live in RVs, but us, we lived in tents and teepees. And so I just so remember this one night in a teepee, after the fire went out. about the night. I laid down on the ground. My mother used to cut, and all the adults used to cut the spruce tree branches, and that's what our mattress was. So you smell it, hey? At night you smell it. And so after the fire went out, I was still awake, and I just began to hear the night sounds. Holy, I heard the lonesome cry of a loon, and I heard the great big splash of a beaver tail on the water, and I heard the bull moose, calling its mate, and I heard owls and coyotes, and I fell asleep. That's how I fell asleep, with those sounds of the nature's sounds. And I just remember feeling so safe. And I was looking at the teepee opening. It was a good night. It was moonlight. And I could see the stars. And somehow I felt how little human beings are in comparison to the big creation out there. The creation that sustains us each and every day. And I believed my grandmother when she said, of all creation, the least significant is humanity. I saw that night. I felt so little, like a little dot. And I felt so safe. So that's the way I felt. And I only spoke Cree. Those are the feelings I went to school with, but that's not the feelings I came out with when I was in my teens. I think the most important work in mentoring is to explore what young people believe about themselves. And to let them know that they can change those. When back to truth and reconciliation, I went to the very last event. My daughter, who works for the school in our community, and my niece, her cousin, she works for the school. They said, "Come on, we're going to take you to truth and reconciliation." Said, "You can shop. There's lots of vendors there." So I said, "Okay." Sure enough, there was lots. And you know what I thought of? It was at the convention center in Edmonton. And many, many years ago, when I started my journey at Maswacis Cultural College, one time I went into the bathroom. I saw a picture of all these children, and the caption was big, and it said, "Where are the children?" Where are the children? And there was a door at the end of the kind of like the end of the wall of the washroom. And I thought, what's that? I'm gonna go check. So I opened the door, and there's about a stall after stall after stall of showers. And I thought, holy mackerel, that must be where all those little girls were abused. I just stood there and I cried. Stood there for a while. So I got out. And then when I went to the Truth and Reconciliation at the very top of that elevator, it's about 3 levels down, eh? And I seen all these elders, white hair, just enjoying the conference. And I thought, there are the children. Those are the children. And I felt great sadness and great joy at the same time. That that I saw the resilience of our people. I saw how tough we are, and that made me cry because I never believed I was tough. Then we were there all day, and it was so beautiful. I'm part Danisa, Cree, and Anishinaabe. So um, I'm told that my roots started in Sault Ste. Marie area. And my ancestors made the trek out west, and we ended up out here. My grandmother was born out here, and her father had 2 wives. The first one, she couldn't have children, so he took another wife. Her name was Eva. And Eva and my grandfather had my grandmother. So from there, my grandmother taught me about Anishinaabe way because her mother passed away, and that other woman, my other grandmother, her name was Mitemos. Mitemos only spoke Anishinaabe, and from there my grandmother uh, spoke the language. And by the time we came along, already nobody spoke it. There was nobody to take the pipes over because already the Catholics were there. The full Gospels were there. In my community today, there's strong diehard Catholics and full Gospels. And at first I had a great big problem with them, but I kind of grew um, to accept that they never made it back to the culture, and to believe that they too, from their religions, have a God, and that God is powerful. So that's kind of like how I came to reconciliation with that difficult part. After, anyways, what I was going to tell you about it, about the Anishinaabe thing, was when we got to that place, my daughter, my oldest daughter, works in health. She had a booth. Next door to her was a young man, but he wasn't present when I got there. So my daughter told me, just go sit in the chairs in there. And so I said, okay. She had to go back to do her work. And that guy came back, as it turns out, in that booth, and he shook my hand, and he said, I'm so and so. I forget his name now. I'm so and so. And I said, and I'm Murial Lee, kind of thing. So we got to talking, and he said, I'm from Turtle Clan. I said, oh, I'm Bear Clan. We started putting our commonalities together, and he said, you are from the Sault Ste. Marie area. That's where the people you're describing, that's where they come from. He said, we have Midiwin ceremony every year, and each year we wait for your relatives to come to our ceremony, but they never come. And so that's how I contacted that. And that happened through Truth and Reconciliation. So, I believe that each of you that are working where you're working right now, you're meant to be there. You're supposed to be there. I've learned that much about life to believe that. So when that event was over, one of my council members called me and he said, can you drive my mother-in-law to the bus depot? That time there was still a bus depot in Edmonton. She has to take, I think, another bus to Northwest Territories. She had been at Truth and Reconciliation. So I said, oh, okay. So he told me where to pick her up, what time. So I did. And me and this lady, we talked all the way from Maswacis to Edmonton. And she said, and you know what I think about this? She said, it's the last event, but it should have been the first. She said, I'm just starting to feel what happened to me. I'm just starting to know what happened to me, why I I am the way that I am. Said I want to know who I am. And we parted ways just like that. But I think young people need to know. But if the young people are to know, the mentor has to know first. And so I encourage each of you to step outside of what our educational institutions have taught. I really liked one professor that I had in my undergraduate work. And one day, it was about like this time of the year, classes had begun. And he said, okay, so for all of you, for those of you that will be convocating next year, I have a question for you. He said, if what we have taught you in the past 3-4 years would only amount to 30% of what you need when you get on your side of the table, where's the other 70% gonna come from? He said, how's that baggage back there? Do you have unfinished business that you need to deal with? Because that's what's going to stand in your way. He said, it's not going to be about how much you learned here. It's going to be about who you are and what you bring to the table that's going to make or break your client. We were running into each other. We only had 2 counselors in that. This was in Camrose at Augustana. There was only 2 counselors. So we were running into each other, making our appointments for that past year. Fortunately for me, I was also going to ceremonies. And so the strength comes from there too. So anytime that any of you workers have the opportunity to join, say, a sweat lodge ceremony, just go do it. Just go. You don't have to worry about anything. The gift that you will receive will be given to you by the Creator according to what your needs are to become an effective mentor, a more effective mentor. So those are the words that I have, and our hour is almost up, Tanya. I can't hear good, so you ask the question if they have any.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Muriel. You've shared so many great lessons with us. When I started today's session, I played a drum dance that was for a jingle dance dresser or a jingle dress dancer. And you said to remind you because you were going to share some knowledge with us. Please, if you don't mind, these last minutes to share that with us.
Okay, I have two teachings around that. The first one, and you can shut the record off at this point.